I'm ready to slash and burn.
No quarter. I am going to be uncomfortable and all over you from start to finish.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And today is definitely an international edition of the show. I've definitely had many international competitors on this show, but today we're talking all about UK combat robotics. If it's not obvious from both my shirt and my guest that that's what we're talking about today. And I'm really excited, for the folks that I have on the show today. So before we get into anything, I'm just going to have everybody introduce themselves, just in case if you're watching this show, you don't know who these folks are, although you really should. But anyways, I will go ahead and start with Tom and Sarah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tom Brewster, builder and driver of Monsoon on BattleBots, Toron on Robot Wars, Drizzle, the Beetleway, and various other small creations.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm also on Team Monsoon.
Yes, absolutely. One of the best teams in BattleBots, by the way. I'm not biased at all. Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm from Bristol, which is a city in the UK where we do events as Bristol Bot Builders. I started doing ants at university and then met these lovely people in the scene, and then had a crazy year in 2018 where I went from doing little university ant weights to joining the two-handed Death Flamingo heavyweight team, doing the BuggleBots web series, which destroyed my soul, but it was cool while it lasted, and starting Bristol Bot Builders, which is now like sort of 10 events a year across ant weights, beat weights, and featherweights, a lot of which I do with Dave Weston.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm David Weston. I team held Robotics. I was on Robot Wars with Crackers and Smash, and also as a background character. I've been doing this since 2007, and I compete at like four different weight classes, and I've got like 17 robots across those classes. But I also help to run ant and beetle events, and featherweights at Dojo. So yeah, that takes up a lot of my time. So yeah, I'm very ingrained into the UK scene.
Yeah, we were saying before we started that it's very, very rare that Dave Weston is not at an event in the UK. He somehow seems to be everywhere at once. So he is the absolute rock of our scene. So I'm really glad you got Dave on today.
Yeah, definitely Dave is one of the pillars of the robot combat scene. I think it would fall apart pretty quickly without him. So yeah.
It's good to know. It's good to know I'm appreciated.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely have kind of a wide variety to talk about, because I do want to get into, some of the history of the scene there in the UK, talk about kind of the differences with, how things are here in the States, and then talk about what the scene's like today. Because it's obviously evolved over time, just like everything in robot combat tends to do. But the scene in the UK, at least in terms of what's more like well known, obviously started with Robot Wars back in the late 90s. And I did find it interesting because, with Robot Wars, it kind of followed a similar path to BattleBots for a while. They roughly aired at the same type of times. I think the main difference is with Robot Wars, it kind of ended in that incarnation in 2018, whereas BattleBots kind of still has continued on. The scene overall seems pretty like lively over there. Is there any reason that you all think in particular that as a TV show, Robot Wars ended in 2018, whereas BattleBots didn't here? Is there any insight to that?
I think they put it on at the same time as Blue Planet, and you can't compete with David Attenborough.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah. Agreed. Unanimous decision here. David Attenborough is unfortunately more powerful than Robot Wars.
They were broadcast the same time.
The same time slot on BBC Two and BBC One. It was like they sent out. It was a bit
If they could have put on any other show on that like instead of Robot Wars, I mean, Robot Wars for a different start, and then that show would have got cancelled instead of Robot Wars.
Yeah, exactly. David Attenborough is a powerful man. I do want to add though that I feel like the reboot never quite had that momentum of the initial first run, where I feel like it was the biggest show on the BBC, whereas the reboot, a lot of people in the UK, when you mention Robot Wars, they know about the old stuff and not the new stuff. And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
When we run events and members of the public come along, they're like, oh, it's like that Craig Charles show we remember from when we were kids, but they don't remember anything with the new guys at all.
I think the promotion of the new series was a little lackluster, unfortunately. A lot of people didn't realize that it had been rebooted until well after the fact. There's a few of the bigger website names that cottoned on, like Lad Bible, for example. They were a big pusher of the new series, but obviously didn't hit quite the right audience, I don't think. So we didn't get the figures we were hoping for.
Yeah, I think what BattleBots has managed to do with its reboot, particularly when it got to Discovery, is show it as a sport. Whereas I think Robot Wars was trying to do it as an educational science show with the new reboot, or at least that was an angle they were trying to push a lot harder. And while that's great, and I'm a teacher and I think education is really important, and robot combat's a really good way to learn skills, I don't think it's the way to entice people in. I think the masses of destruction and the sort of big budget sportsmanship side of BattleBots is what seems to be doing very well for them. Whereas I don't think Robot Wars really gripped people because the garage build side didn't seem to work so well in the modern era, did it? I don't know, Tom, if you want to add your boat that you entered back in the day.
So I think fundamentally, I think BattleBots know their audience better than Robot Wars did, if you sort of know what I mean. And as you say, I think technology has evolved quite a way since the original run of Robot Wars. And I think the TV show was still trying to sort of straddle the line between kind of a bit of what the old Robot Wars was back in the day with the garage builds, but also kind of ignoring what the new technology was. You know, there's a reason that there weren't too many BattleBots robots in Robot Wars. It's because they're, you know, it's a different league, and I think Robot Wars wasn't really, you know, taking that in mind when they were running their show. So
there is one thing that should be noted, where in America the heavyweight spinners were still allowed to run outside of BattleBots between the hiatus of the Comedy Central era and the new one, whereas in the UK we couldn't. So our technology in terms of the full combat was about 10 years behind the Americans. So they had their reliable spinners, big smashy stuff for TV, whereas we were still very much live show robots. And then all of a sudden, we have an arena that we can play the big spinners in, and we weren't quite ready for that. So we had to do it in such a short space of time as well.
Yeah. I think the American robots are designed to destroy each other within 3 minutes, whereas a lot of the UK robots are designed to run weekend after weekend for like the whole year. I think that's
a really good point.
So
yeah,
there's a reason why the UK robots look a bit more kind of rugged, I suppose. You know,
rustic.
That's the word. Yeah.
They don't look rugged because they're ragged. But that's the thing that I think we've had, which has been amazing, is at the time when BattleBots was being rebooted, you guys had robo games for your Last Rites Tombstone-esque Minotaur fights. We were talking about those guys before, but in the UK, we were fortunate, I'd say, at the time when Robot Wars was being rebooted, we had about 8 heavyweight events a year across the country. But as mentioned, they were all non-spinner, so the flippers were sensational. The doorstop shaped robots, the triangles as we like to call them, were peak triangle, but the spinners had some work to do. So I think when people saw the show, they were kind of disappointed in the performance of the robots. There was a lot of just wheels falling off and very, very short-lived fights. So I think they should have maybe thought about that before they started the show, not rushing in, but giving the producers should give people time to plan. I think that's true for BattleBots too, though. I'm sure you'll agree, Tom.
Yeah, hashtag next week every time, I swear. There's not enough time. And then they don't, and then it jumps on you super quick. And
I think it was like when we were preparing for Robot Wars, I wasn't told about it until the December before the filming, I think, and then filming started in like February. So I think it was like the very end of November, and then we've got to get spinner robots and stuff ready in 3 months. And
Cancel
that's,
Christmas.
yeah, I mean,
Oh.
that's tough for your shed engineer team. It's a bit of a leap.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, yeah, I mean, BattleBots definitely has that issue to some extent as well. But you know, it continues on, obviously. Now, yeah, because you mentioned, like, you know, some of the different things, and you know, that kind of leans into the differences with American robots and UK robots. You know, one of those things definitely with Robot Wars, where you don't really see that at BattleBots, is the house robots. There are some competitions here where there are house robots, such as NHRL. However, those house robots are very different than Robot Wars house robots. And I mean, do you think that with having those house robots and having different aspects to the combat, where, you know, there was like the gauntlet type of situation versus just like a head-to-head standard type of competition, do you think that that was something people liked, or do you think that that detracted from, you know, what people liked about it?
I mean, speaking personally, I really enjoyed the games because I've been involved with helping to run the Beetleweight trials at RoboNerd, the pinball, and recently the football, soccer, as you guys call it. And I mean, I enjoyed those, but obviously the combat was what people really enjoyed. That's why after the first 2 series they scrapped it. It did, it did well. I think the viewers enjoyed it, but I think they preferred the gratuitous violence, as Craig Charles put it. Yeah, that's just the way we like it. As for the house robots, they need a household name. They needed a household name. They had to have something that people could pin to that series. It's like a favorite character in a TV show. So they had to have these personalities, and House robots hit that nail on the head. So I think that was definitely the thing they needed to market the series.
But I do feel like, in the same way we were saying how robots have changed between the garage builds of old and modern, I feel like the house robots in the new series didn't really have that impact. Like they couldn't just cut through the aluminium foil-esque chassis of old robots and all that. Back in the day, it was a spectacle, and they couldn't really do that spectacle in the modern series as well. So it probably helped add to the less good fights.
It all changed so much. The Killer Lock Claw, like, that used to be cutting through chassis and stuff, and nowadays, and then it was just in the new series, it was just a grab. That was it, because it just couldn't handle hard docks like AR500, that kind of thing.
But as a counterpoint, I was at Crawley with Dave last weekend, which is one of the heavyweight live events, and they have a robot like the Killer Lock that weighs a ton, and they put it in with the featherweights, which are this big, and this thing is actually essentially a giant forklift-esque thing, and it's just sitting on top of them. And for the audience, that's beautiful comedy, and that brings people in. That gives them something, like Dave says, to focus on. So it's really good for spectacle.
I was laughing my ass off watching you run over Goose.
Yeah, there's a Goose robot Craig from my team was running, and it was just constantly going for the house robots, just pecking away pointlessly at them, and then they just sort of run over and flatten it, and then it would just sort of, the neck would just sort of pop back up, and off it would go again, and it just became this kind of slapstick Tom and Jerry sort of comedy. So I think in the right situation, house robots are incredible. But again, Robot Wars was trying to be like the serious show, and I felt like the house robots didn't land so well in the modern take. But we have house robots in our events sometimes when we're being silly. Basically, when you want to be silly, house robots are great. That's what I think. I don't know about you guys.
I think I agree as well. And to be honest, I think without house robots and without the hazards, you do sort of tend to force people down a very competitive sort of avenue where all you get are like very highly optimized spinner death machines, which arguably is what we're starting to see really at NHRL. Without the hazards and without the house robots, that might be the route it's going down. And it's fine for now, but one day, we might need to start see some different robots coming along, or some more hazards coming in.
We've lost Dave, I think.
Sorry, hello, no, I'm still here.
Yeah.
You're here now.
No, I was saying we need to have variety in the environment to add variety to the robots. Otherwise, like Tom said, it's just going to be spinners everywhere. And we see one spinner, yes, you've seen one spinner, you've seen them all, but maybe not quite. But I like to see the variety. I like to see the axes and the control boxes and the crushers and etc. etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is a sport, but also it's entertainment. And if the sport isn't entertaining, then what's the point? So
Yeah, and to bring it to the live scene aspect a little bit, in the time I've been getting into this hobby, I'm not as early as these guys, but sort of between 2018 and now, we've been doing a lot of tweaking with the arenas, because I think BattleBots had a very, very crowded arena with the house robots and like 4 hazards. But we found at the moment this sort of balanced sweet spot where we have a pit in one diagonal corner and the opposite diagonal corner we have an out of the arena zone, and then the rest of the arena is a box like the American style ones. And it seems to be like we're keeping an eye on it, but so far at our events and others that I've been watching of the UK ones, we get that balance where we could have all these high kinetic energy spinners, but then the control bots do stand a chance, the flippers stand a chance, people try crushers and stuff, but that little out of the arena zone is both great for verts, but also can be terrible for verts, as I'm sure. Both of you guys all build verts. Dave has a very potent vert in 7th Circle. Tom's got straddle and drizzle, and sometimes they'll yeet someone else into the Utah, sometimes they go in themselves, and that's part of the risk, and I really love that risk reward aspect of it.
I was just finished watching the 2022 BBB champs actually before I joined the call, and there should be 4 on Bish Bash Bosh doing well, and then all of a sudden bounce yourself out in the Utah zone. So like, it's it can be a pitfall as well, like you say. So
yeah, and I think that was one of the things in BattleBots that made the flippers have a chance for a bit, that they've tried to kind of get rid of now. They had those 2 little corners, I want to say until the end of last season, is it right? And then this season, currently, they've kind of sealed them off a bit. So like, as a Mammoth fan, I was very excited that Mammoth could get a KO through yeeting someone off into the load-in door or whatever. Like, how cool is that? I mean, I think some Americans just are purists and want, you can only die through pure death, whereas us Brits are like, you can die by going in this naughty corner, and then it's okay because then we can take you out and you can fight again. That's the bit I like, is that we can get people back in without the robots being completely decimated. You can remove a wheel, that's fun, but let's not write off the robot immediately, because then you start getting these people bringing multiple copies of their robots as well. Hey, Tom?
oh yeah, oh no, who did that?
It's nice to win with skill and strategy, not just big lump of steel go burr.
And yeah, and having, so I was saying before the recording, we had Brandon Bennett Young over here fighting in featherweights, and he normally builds vertical spinners because he has to stay competitive at Norwalk when he's doing his featherweights. But he ran his grab lift control bot in our thing, and because of the pit in the outer arena zone, he felt like he had a valid opportunity to win fights through control, which is, to me, is a magical thing to see. An American seeing the hope in hazards, That's,
it was unfortunate that the sprocket broke on his gearbox. He couldn't use it to its full potential, but c'est la vie.
Yeah. And I don't know why, again, like when we're talking about differences, that definitely tends to be one of them. And I mean, I'm definitely a person that appreciates that variety, and different ways of, I mean, this show is called Outside of the Box for a reason. It's not as just literal, of the battle box, but it's also outside of the box ways of thinking, and having to figure out problems of, okay, how am I going to solve for facing this robot? And I think that variety kind of lends itself to being able to think that way. I will say one other thing that I think, and you all can let me know if that's still a thing with the the current events today, but one thing that I appreciated about Robot Wars was just some of the naming conventions of some of these hazards, the Disc of Doom, the Pit of Oblivion, I like, to me,
Fog of War.
Yeah, I need something that, as you would probably say over there in the UK, is a little bit cheeky. That I appreciate that. Is that still something that you see at events with that kind of like just funny naming conventions?
when we
Oh,
do
for
really
sure.
silly
Yeah.
events, so like if we do this thing called BattleBots, which is you chuck a robot together with hot glue in half an hour, and the arena is as much of a joke as the robots. So we'll have, like, instead of a pit, we've got an actual toilet where the lid of the toilet opens. So you're falling into the bog of oblivion, I guess it would be called, instead of the pit of oblivion. It's the British terminology there.
At the Christmas party, you had it was a Christmas tree, like two
Oh,
Christmas
yeah.
trees that were like on motors, so it was like the screws.
Yeah. We theme it up for each event. So
Donington, wasn't it? It was, yeah.
yeah. So we had a bake-off themed one, which is obviously very British. So we had a rolling pin drum, and then when we had the Christmas party, we replaced it with miniature Christmas trees. So Christmas trees aggressively flapping their tinsel at you. You know, it's very. But so we have fun that way. I think the events where we're being serious, the arena hazards have serious names, but when we're being silly, we go very silly. I think that's the important thing. And I feel like that is a British thing.
What was the
isn't it?
What was the Harry Potter themed one?
Yeah, for some reason we had a Halloween spooky one, and there was a Harry Potter with a giant hand, and it would just sort of slap you. And I don't know why it was Harry Potter. Craig was having a weird day. My partner in crime at Bristol Bottlers, and yeah, he just, there's a great video. I'll have to send you a clip. It's Harry Potter being played badly on recorder, and there's this face, and then it just sort of slaps down on the camera, and it's. So yeah, there you go. Silly hazards are still a thing, I can tell you that much, but only at silly events, and normally ones with lots of drinking involved as well.
I can definitely appreciate that. Now I definitely want to get into the pits as a hazard in general, because as most people that follow combat robotics significantly know, that's not typically a thing in the US. There are some events that do the pits, but that's definitely more of a UK thing. I know that they do more of that in like the New Zealand scene and stuff like that. Number one, why is it a thing there? And, you know, kind of tell me more about the ways that people can use that. You know, it definitely, I would say, gives control bots a little bit more of an advantage that they wouldn't have normally.
And I have a feeling in the UK it came about when Series 2 started, because the KO abilities of the robots were a bit lacking in the early series, so they had to have a way to have a definitive winner, and they just thought, oh, big chasm in the floor, and that was that, and it seems to have just stuck as a staple since then. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's how it looks to me.
Yeah.
And I think there's also, like, there was a lot of in the kind of in between, there was a lot of sort of sumo robots as well. The tiniest amp weights, the little handheld robots, sort of came from a sort of inspiration of sumo style robots. So they had open pits permanently the whole time. The thing that's been really cool about the last few years is with BuggleBots in particular, was where that kicked off, I think, was having a pit delay button. So we weren't just having an open pit or any time. When I first joined the scene, there were people who'd instantly open the pit and instantly put you in, and the fights would last 5 seconds, and we all hated it. I hated it. I feel like a lot of people hated it.
Remember that? Yeah.
So now we have a pit delay, and it means you have to survive a good 30 plus seconds of spinner onslaught or whatever before you can open the pit. And I feel like that's the sort of best of both worlds. We get some violence if we want it, but if you want to be a control bot, there's some hope, you know, like a compromise.
Yeah, I like that. I think I see the pit as the great leveler. You know, it can give a down and out robot that's getting trashed one last chance to take the win. And you know, and I've experienced that many times. You know, very cozy in there. But yeah, I think it's great, and it's one of those things that again, like, forces people to move away from just the meta spinner death boxes, and it gives the control robots a chance to win the fights, and it forces a bit more variety on the sport. So
and for spectators as well, like because when we do our events, we want to have an audience, and we want the audience to be excited. They're as excited for damage as they are as someone like edging around the pit or just missing the pit and another robot going in. Like the switch and bait thing, whenever that happens, yeah, the tension is awesome. And again, to quote Brandon, an American in the UK, because it's a good sample of one, but he said, because we had a big crowd at this brewery watching Brandon fight, when he dodged the pit I dodged the pit and he went in, and he was gutted, but he was so happy because the crowd loved it. Maybe it's because America fell in the pit, but you know, either way, it was a crowd favorite moment, and we love entertaining people. And at the end of the day, again, their robot's not written off. It might be damaged, but it's another way to get some violence, but not all the violence, which is what we need for live events to make it sustainable for people. Like, we don't have infinite money. We're spending our pocket money on this fun hobby. So let's make it sustainable for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I think that more events here in the US should consider implementing a pit system, because I mean, to me, I think that if you're watching a match and you want to create this air of drama, seeing, you know, a robot so close and like teetering on the edge of the pit, there's drama right there.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's it just changes the atmosphere when you see things like, you know, that close, and you've got to watch them use their skill to get around it, or indeed to put their opponent into it. So it is also a good implementation of the skill of the driver. So it's not, you know, that's an additional thing to add to the spectacle.
Yeah,
But
I think I'd like to see Norwalk with some hazards or some kind of zone for control bots to aim for, because, you know, again, all we'll end up with are spinner death boxes. So
yeah, I think one of the best American YouTuber builders is the guy who's doing the taco rib at the moment, but he did one that was a cereal box munching one, like, and the only reason that existed at all was because his local event had a pit, and that pit only opened 2.5 minutes into a 3-minute fight, so he had to survive and endure damage to his cardboard cereal box robot for 2.5 minutes, but he did it. And then he'd munch them down, then drop them down this trap door, and the whole crowd would go mental for it. And it was like only his event in that part of America did it at that time, I think. And so I think it can add some variety to your robots, but obviously we're super biased because we're all very used to having it. And I think it'd be great to see a UK event. I think we've had an Antway event before, Dave, where there was no pits and all spinners, right? And we just had a destructive derby.
Yeah, we had one in Wales, in Caerphilly, like years ago, and it was the same arena I use now, but it had blocked off walls, so there was a lot of spinners. It wasn't all spinners, but there was a lot of spinners, and it was just an absolute slaughter fest. Although we did have a few spinners still fly up over the walls because they weren't fully boxed in like the Norwalk ones, for example. But yeah, it was when they got nowhere to go and nothing to aim for, then yeah, all you can do is just try to break their fist with your face, as it were.
Absolutely. And real quick, I just wanted to welcome James Cooper from Quantum to joining the conversation. No, I mean, I love the idea of pits, and also real quick to mention too, because Joe, you were talking about the serial robot. I believe you're referring to Kokoto Mane and his robot Serial Killer.
Oh yeah, but that's inspired by this Carter Hurd is his name. I can't remember what his serial bot is. But he's like it's inspired by that. So he's obviously started a meta of serial box robots, and you know, without the pit, you wouldn't have that incredible, you know, potency of Monchi. I mean, and I guess they're all inspired by Tentamushi, right? Really, which is sort of having a big floppy grabby thing. And
this Cray's got Mouse House.
Yeah, Mr. Cat's Mouse House is the beta weight version, and it's just a giant kitchen bowl that just flops on top of other robots. And he eventually put a drum inside it as well, so that was quite cool. So yeah, I think this is it. Try different things, right? I think Greg Munson always says he wants to try an all-terrain thing, and there's a hack space in Nottingham that in October are going to try a sand pit for their first ever combat robot event. And people are going to try all-terrain bots with massive wheels, and you get double the weight limit to work with. But I just think this is the stuff you need if you want to make this sport varied and exciting. Let different event organizers try different things. You know, don't just do what everyone else does because they do it. You know, try these things because then you get cool designs, right?
Well, myself and Joe Lloyd, one of the other organizers of Orcs, we were working on the arena today, and we were talking about different floors, like both for cheapness sake and also changed the meta, going from wood, which is sort of standard for round weights, to stainless steel, which means it's going to change the grip, change the dynamic, but doesn't allow magnets. So we're interested to see how that's going to change the game if, as and when we implement that. As you said about the sandpit thing, I have a horrible feeling there's going to be a lot of very sad N20s and stuff full of grit. But
Yes, yeah. Anytime we've had allowed glitter in robots, we're finding glitter in our
God,
robots for years afterwards, and it broke
don't get
so
me
many.
started on the glitter.
It's crazy. Like, we didn't think it would be damaging, right? But someone tried a glitter cannon for a Christmas party in 2018 at one of our events, and someone's still finding glitter in their robots this year from that. And it was just like, it was getting in all the gearboxes and actually killing people's drives. So if they ever allow glitter as a projectile weapon, we're all screwed. It's the new meta.
That would be very fun to see. Double Jeopardy, just instead of a £5 slug, just throw out a load of confetti.
It's a really interesting sport in that because it has a young history. The investment in it's relatively small, and it's like football stadiums all look like football stadiums because there's kind of like everybody's come to a consensus. I think the sport's pretty young in that, and there's a lot of energy in the sport. So people like ourselves and you guys, you always want to kind of see what's possible and are always excited by things. So we've always thought of putting turf, like lay it upside down so you have like soil and just kind of see what happens. But because it's a young sport, there's, relatively speaking, not a lot of money in it. So you get people like ourselves and Joe and David and many other amazing event organizers around the world. They have to spend a lot of money to produce these arenas, and you're kind of limited in what you can produce because there's a big respect for the amount of people that have to put their money in to build the robots that will compete in them. So I've always said I'd love to make like this scenery kind of landscape and do that, but that's all well and good if I want to do that, but then I'm reliant on teams that have to go to work and save their money, pay their mortgage and all that stuff, and then have their spare money to build this robot that's quite specific for that one environment. If we all said we're all going to build sandpits, then it kind of starts to, it would be a great challenge, but then at least the teams can start going, well, yeah, I'll spend a bit of money on developing a robot for that, but if it's just my whim, which I would love to do, and I'm glad that somebody else is doing it, but we are reliant on the community accepting it and putting their time, and regardless of the weight of the weight class of the robots, there's a hell of a lot of time, and you're asking people to put a lot of their life into producing something that can compete in your competition. So it's a really delicate balance, and it's not right the way it is because it gets stagnant and it becomes repetitive and predictable. But people have to keep putting the reins on me because I want to do all this stuff, and then you have to remember, well, actually it's reliant on people building to that whim that I've come up with, and everybody else. It's a tough one, really.
The plus side of doing experiments at the lower weight classes is the cost. To build a brand new kind of machine is a little, it isn't as crippling. But trying to build a like 100-kilo robot for a sandpit are in a whole different thing, like you say.
Even producing like an amp weight, like the most cost-effective one on a sandpit or a turf terrain or water, you can get it so wrong so easily, and that there is a learning curve to making something that will actually work and have fun, because nobody's going to have fun if they turn up with something that just, my concept just doesn't work. I've spent 200 quid on something, and relative to a heavyweight, it's extremely cheap, but it's still 200 quid on a wasted weekend or whatever. So it's really difficult, and we have huge amounts of respect for the builders. We always said it when we started each Robot Wars. We were kind of fortunate that we were builders as well, and that kind of gap between the teams and the production We had a great respect for what the producers had done and the amount of money that went into putting on something like Robot Wars. But at the same degree, you could see 30 teams who had spent a hell of a lot of time and money, more so the time that was kind of humbling, having a huge amount of respect for what they were able to achieve and bring to the table, and it was equal to what the production team had done. Yeah, the amount of what you watch it on TV, and it's a great hour of entertainment, and then you go off and go to work and do whatever. But for the teams, that was just like the cherry on top was seeing your robot on TV. You know, Sarah and Tom I'm sure will
Oh my
agree
God.
that
Like,
is just what people see at home. That's just their like little bit of entertainment. Sit with a glass of wine and enjoy, and then they bugger off and do something else. But for the teams, it's your life. And
Yeah. How are you
And-
finding being a builder, Christine? How's is that shifted your perspective having to like not just obviously driving recently, you said you did, but how's building as a perspective shifter for you?
Yes, actually, that's a good question. And you know, I don't want to dive too much into it because I don't want to, you know, take the light away from the topic. But I mean, I can say though that it definitely has shifted my perspective, because when you know, to James's point, when you put, you know, a Beetle, like for me, we're talking about is, you know, like $700 American, which comparatively to a heavyweight is not that much, but it's still a pretty good chunk of money to put into something. And you want to make sure that it works and that it's what you expect it to be. That has yet to be seen because the competition's in 2 weeks, so we'll see how it works out. But you know, it is one of those things that, yes, I'm building this for fun because I enjoy it and I like the challenge, but I also want it to do well. I don't want to show up and like not win a match and feel like I put so much time and everything into it and it's not what I'm expecting. So, you know, I definitely appreciate that perspective. And I think, like James, you brought up a couple of really good points in that. Number one, I don't think anybody has really talked about the fact that, comparatively speaking, this sport is really young. You know, it hasn't been around for as long as I think most of us feel like it has been, you know, that have kind of followed it since the beginning. And that, you know, when you have these competitions, it's so important to make sure that the competition, like as an event organizer, you're investing money, and as the people that you're hoping to come to the event and compete, they're investing money. And I think everybody's expectations and what they're looking to get out of it kind of have to align to make that as successful as it can be.
Yeah,
I
I
think
feel
that's the good thing about having Greg and Trey on running BattleBots is they've done it before themselves. You know, they've built robots, so they have that inherent respect for what people turn up with. You know, you see, yeah, what Tom and Sarah build, and all these people around the world are producing this. And I know from Robot Wars, it's extremely humbling going, geez, we asked people to build these things and this is what they've turned up with. And yeah, it's really, sorry, my language. It is extremely humbling and even when we did our featherweight events, we never took for granted when you would get 50, 60 teams turn up from around the world. And as Mr. Mangles turns up from Australia and he's awful at driving, and you're like, you've spent so much money being here. But all the teams, you go, actually, they've all put so much effort. I can see how much work has gone into these machines to come and turn up to my event, and I'm extremely grateful for that. And it's nice that all the TV shows had that element. Like, well, I hope it came across for Robot Wars because we were part of the production for that, but certainly comes across for BattleBots, for Greg and Trey having a deep understanding of what it takes for the teams to be there. It's never quite where the builders want it to be, that line of appreciation in the form of financial return, but
it's just nice to get some recognition from the people who enjoy watching the sport. I mean, there's an awful lot of trolls out there who don't seem to realize just how much effort actually goes into the production of BattleBots and Robot Wars and the actual robots themselves, and they thinking they can do better. Like, well, get humble, come and join us, and you will see for yourself. This is a lot of work,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah,
a lot of the time, not for any financial things, just for the kudos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember during COVID when we couldn't go to BattleBots last year,
Oh,
2021,
yeah.
when we couldn't go, but our crate got there. And like we were getting so many comments online saying like, why don't you just let another team drive it? And it's just like
That would, if we'd done
uh,
that,
Just
that would have
no.
been the most like heartbreaking thing, because
Yeah.
we've spent so long on it, and yeah, like I feel like both BattleBots and Robot Wars could almost make an entire extra series just about
Yeah.
how the robots were built, like the airs alongside them.
Yeah,
You know,
we've
you
never
could
really
do
had
that for
that.
every
with-
single team.
I know in an earlier series of Robot Wars, they had something that was like behind the scenes, as it were, and it was just explaining in detail and had the VTs at home, building the robots at home, the whole background thing, just to show what all the trials and tribulations that went into building it, where they where they learned something new, where they made a screw up or whatever else. It just shows they are humans after all.
Yeah.
All these
It's
great
very
engineers that
difficult
do
to,
screw up every now and again.
from a production perspective, you've got 1 hour to keep people engaged, and obviously the battles are the pinnacle and the highlight. But trying to get the actual journey that a team has gone through is so incredibly difficult. It's difficult enough with things like football, where you feel extremely disconnected from the people, that live such different lives and different. You just can't get that connection, and it's so difficult for a production company to, within that hour, provide the entertainment of the battle and the whole backstory. But then
Well, when Series 2
Yeah.
did, that's why it was a separate episode, because, like you say, they have to keep the audience engaged. Maybe it's just me being so into it. I would have liked to have seen that more on screen, but they had to do it, like you say, they had to do a separate episode just because they can only fit so much in one episode. So they have to make sure it's all engaged. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jay.
But I just want to say that, like, that's the thing we have now that we didn't have with old Robot Wars, earlier BattleBots, is we've got podcasts like this, we've got YouTube vlogs, we're getting more and more connected in the sense of we're seeing people's like journey. Like, okay, forum posts back in the day is probably the equivalent, but just seeing the amount of struggle and time and effort and iterations, right? When you see people chucking away a whole part of a robot they've messed up, they've done a hole wrong, or they've done their hard ox order wrong, and they've got to bore out some horrible hardened piece of metal. I don't know. We know the struggles, and people who are really interested in that, which is probably not your general audience on TV, that the YouTube and podcasts, etc. Forums. We've just started a forum again in 2023, and it's been so good to see people doing build diaries, getting to see the guts of these robots a bit more. But that's because we're builders and we love seeing that. And a lot of the audience who watch these TV shows just want to see robots smash each other. So you've got to get that balance right, haven't you?
It's funny because you'd think that that's all people want, but actually to create compelling content, you need that personal story, and that's where robot combat itself it's not enough, and that's the same for any sport. You think of Formula One with Drive to Survive. The Drive to Survive was the bit that made it a compelling story, because you got to meet the drivers and the teams and the people behind it, and that's kind of what is difficult for BattleBots and Robot Wars is because it doesn't have the same airtime as massive F1 budgets and things like that. You've still got that 1 hour. In Robot Wars' case, you had 6 1-hour episodes in order to try and get some amazing content, but also give people that personal connection. So you get that real connection with the team that you're a fan of. It's incredibly difficult. If it was a more established thing, like a household thing, then you'd be able to invest more into having like sideshows and opportunities to meet the Monsoon guys and meet the Tombstone guys and kind of get to know what really goes into building this thing and what really goes into driving the machine. it's incredibly challenging.
So we need a Netflix docudrama of robot combat. Then we need a Drive to
That would
Survival,
be great.
Welcome to Wrexham or whatever
Yeah.
for robot combat. That would be amazing.
And
But
it
I feel
needs
like
to be
Welcome to
narrated by
Wrexham.
David Attenborough.
yeah, there we go. Because he killed Robot Wars. He can bring it back through docudramas and Netflix. That's the plan. There you go. We've got it.
I mean, the background stories of a lot of the Roboteers, and it does. Well, to me, it is medium interest. Sorry, put your teeth back in. Yeah. To me, it's interesting. I was talking with somebody earlier on regarding the way some people come across on TV. It's not how they are in real life. Like they could be the panto villain on BattleBots or Robot Wars or whatever else, and yet in person, nicest person you ever met. It's such a TV kind of warps perspective of real life, as it were. For sure. Sorry.
Can confirm. I was very intimidated at first to meet Ray Billings, and then I met Ray Billings, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, he's the sort of epitome of pantomime villain, and yet in real life he's nicest guy out there, one of the nicest guys out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I do want to get into a little bit of talking about the current scene of combat robotics in the UK, to kind of focus more on what kind of events are going on there, because I mean, I know it's not, there's definitely some cool events. I don't think it seems like it's quite at where like Norwalk is right now, with like
well, we haven't got a billionaire throwing them
Yeah.
exactly.
If you know any, we're on the lookout at the moment. So if you've got a billionaire spare, chuck one our way. Yeah,
I think it's fair to say that we've been in this game for quite some time now, and the British and the Americans, there's always this kind of rivalry of who builds the best robots. And it's very much a case of the environment that you're working in. If the top American teams came to the UK events, I don't think they would win. And it's difficult for the UK teams to go over to America and win, because they are they've gone down different paths. Like a wooden floor straight away makes a massive difference to robot combat. You stick a wooden floor in BattleBots and there would be a very different pecking order. But yeah, I think you have there's extremely talented builders both sides of the pond and elsewhere around Europe. Things that I've seen in China is pretty incredible how quickly they picked up robot combat and how dedicated they are to it. But you're fighting in different environments, and where you've got the amazing events like Norwalk, where you've got full combat spinners. In the UK, you have a bit less spinners on the heavyweight side. I know you've got Roman Robots and Extreme Robots, and Robots Live. They do very different things, and those very different things require a different solution. And that's why flippers have done so well over here. They wouldn't do very well in America, but if the American robots came over here, they probably wouldn't do very well either. It's not better, it's not worse. I think you get equal level of ingenuity, equal level of engineering skills. You see it
was just built to suit environments. So
yeah, and you look at some of the top level engineers in the sport, people like John Reed, you've got Sarah and Tom. You got the Big Nipper team who no longer do so much, but what they were doing it wasn't very competitive, but it was amazing engineering where they wanted to try and force something to be competitive, a little bit like what we do, I guess. But the level of engineering that they went to, if you just built Spinner and went to BattleBots, they'd do pretty well. It's horses for courses, really, and it's not fair to say that the Americans are doing better because they have higher budgets and they have full combat arenas. Because I think if you gave the same opportunity to British teams, they would be at least equally competitive, and vice versa. It's just two different paths, and which is good. It means we get different types of battles.
But yeah, current live scene is really interesting because I think we're finally getting people coming to the hobby who aren't coming from the TV show, because we've had 6 years out now. We had a lot of people who just were looking for something to do over the pandemic in lockdown. They needed like a hobby, and they just sort of Googled stuff, or they went to their local hack space and got into this. So we had this absolute amazing boom after lockdown of new builders, particularly at beta weight, and quite a lot of amp weight this year has kind of picked up a lot. I think featherweight, we need a certain event organizer to pick up a bit more slack, maybe. But we're doing our best with our absolute budget arena. But yeah, and the heavyweights, we've got eight shows a year across 2 touring companies or something. So the scene is thriving. But I am interested to see, as we get further and further away from having that TV show entry point for people, as in, oh, I love that show, Robot Wars. The younger kids aren't going to know that show soon, and hopefully they come across the hobby a different way, because BattleBots isn't that popular over here. Like, it's played on ITV4 or something, so most people won't know it, I'm afraid. Tom and Sarah are not the celebrities they should be. They're not signing enough autographs. So
I think the thing is, BattleBots it's very American, is what I'll say. Like, it's great, but it's just very American, and I think Americans that watch it in America don't realize how American it is. Right? I think I'm right.
Not to sound insulting.
It's great. It's fantastic, but I think Robot Wars has almost quite a nice global appeal to it, in the fact that like anyone can watch it and immediately know what's going on, and can get behind teams straight away because they've all got, I don't know.
The trouble for Robot Wars is, so when Robot Wars first came out, and it was the same with BattleBots, you could watch Razor, Hypnodisc, Chaos 2, and they were really good robots. But you could sit down with your dad or your mum and go, we've got that old wheelchair. I reckon if we stick a thing on it, we could take Razor's arm out. That's what made Robot Wars so amazing. The problem was people like Tom and Carbide guys come up for the new series. So the new series is airing. You're like, okay, we build new arena. There's been a lot of learning since original Robot Wars, so it's a bit more extreme now. But you look at things like what Ellis Ware's building, and Tom and Sarah, and Carbide, and Apollo, and Eruption, and these, in reality, they've done too good a job, and that's really what killed Robot Wars off. Was you can't watch Monsoon and go, I got a wheelchair in the garage and I'm gonna see. They're even laughing about it now. Like, you wouldn't be laughing about it in the old days. I've got a wheelchair in the garage and I've got a chainsaw, and I reckon we could chop Monsoon's wheels off, because it just isn't going to happen. It's like me watching Formula One and going, if I get my dad's old car and we tune the engine up, we can take on Lewis Hamilton. And that's what really knocked Robot Wars on the head, was that what it used to be was a thing that got people really engaged at home and got viewers watching because it was so compelling, a bit like a Pop Idol and X Factor, where people go, I can sing better than them. I'm gonna go next time. You watch it now, and even though it's still the same people, they're at home. They don't have big CNC workshops, things like that, but they still make amazing things, and those amazing things are on the level of what a corporate company would be able to produce in the same time scale. In reality, the quality of the machines was so good that you got that disconnect then. So people were watching Carbide at home, not thinking, I can take part in Robot Wars. It was just an entertainment show. And that's the problem that BattleBots has in the UK, is it's again on that same kind of level where you can't compete in it now. It's too extreme. It's too much money. There's just not that thought connection of going, we can be part of this. And that's where the live event scene comes up, and things like Robo Nerd and Robo Dojo and all the amazing events that are around the UK. They're the things that try to get you connected back to the original audience of going, actually, you guys can take part in this. It doesn't have to cost loads of money. It doesn't have to cost loads of time. You don't have to be a big company. You can order laser cut parts online and get somebody down the road to weld them, and you can have a really good robot. But unfortunately, Robot Wars and BattleBots make it look like these are big corporate companies and with huge backing. And
it's why my heart is in the smaller weight classes, because it's easier to push that to the beginner audience to make you say, oh, I could build that with the starter kits you can buy from BBB or wherever else. And it's just like, yeah, like you say, like James said, BattleBots is just sort of a little too polished. It is for the high end folks, so it has lost its sort of charm of, oh, I could go in the garage and build that. But at least the lower classes are still, they're out there, they're pushing the sport. You don't have to be this polished, high engineered machine. You can build it out of chopping board and wood screws and what have you, and still be reasonably competitive. So yeah, I think we've got a lot of thanks to anybody that's been running the lower weight class events to help the sport along, because things like Norwalk wouldn't be as popular if the low weight classes hadn't been pushed and getting more people involved with that. So
well, that's it's a good point too. It's something that's been brought up on the show a few times about why just people in general don't want to get involved in the sport, because they find it intimidating, even with beetles and stuff like that. Because when you look at Norwalk, at least in America, being like the pinnacle of robot combat at those weight classes, everybody's like, well, I can't go and compete against Jameson Go and like all of these people. But I mean, like that's a big part of my reasoning for really like doing this show and kind of showing people there's lots of ways to get involved. And not only that, but anybody can build a robot. And I can sit here and say this as a 42-year-old mom who can barely put together a bookshelf, that I'm going to solder some wires tonight. So like, if you want to do it, you can do it.
Damn right. And there's so many more guides out there now. And there's so many in America. You guys have so many different like part shops now that weren't here 5 years ago for beetles, and they popped up because of the demand with Norwalk and stuff like that. But the thing that Norwalk's doing that I think is really good, that I was going to start yelling at them if they didn't, not just yelling at my screen, but is they've started doing newcomer friendly focused events, because they just got so many robots going and they're so top tier in the same way BattleBots is. We do the same here, and we're like really proud of. We do a newcomer event in August where you have to build a brand new robot, or you have to be only done 1 or 2 events. We also do an inter-university league as well, and I think it's really important to try lots of different ways to get different people into the sport that are slightly less intimidating than just your full whack national hardcore competition. Because for some people that entices them, I want to go in and fight the best of the best immediately. Other people, they're like, that's terrifying, I don't want to do that. Whereas if you can say, oh, here's an event where everyone who goes is like super new at this. We had a 9-year-old girl winning like 3 fights at the last event, and her whole team, like her whole family were there, like wearing costumes supporting her. And it's like, that something's working when you see moments like that. So that's that again. It's the same as talking about different terrains and different arena types. Try different event styles, like do a newcomer event, do a school event, like do an inter-school league. We've been trying inter-school leagues quite a lot, where each school builds an outweight and they fight other schools in Coventry actually. So your end of the word, the Midlanders in the call. But yeah, there's so many ways to get people enticed in this. So I want to see, I think for Norwalk, they're doing more of an education grant scheme now as well. And I think that's all really positive stuff to get more people, like more outreach to get people in the hobby, rather than relying on a TV show and pure sweaty competitiveness. That's not the only way to get into this hobby.
Yes.
If you get too involved in it, you might end up that way. I mean, everybody had to start somewhere, and it's good to see that. It's good for the audience and stuff to see that they can start at the very lower ranks. Like for example, Ellis showing up with the chopping board robot in that Yeovil event, and now he's building things like Magnetar and such. That's going to, and there's further way that went into BattleBots. So yeah, it's a whole. It doesn't have. It is good to see you can start at that level and still be ultra competitive. So on the can funny, sorry.
No worries. Now before we wrap everything up, I just want to, if anybody has any kind of last thoughts on just, robotics in the UK, where, where it's come from, where it is now and where it's going, because I think it's really exciting stuff.
It's going great, apparently. Yeah. Awkward silence.
I think we need another full combat featherweight event somewhere in the Midlands. Maybe.
Yeah.
Agreed on that.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Basically, the scene is perfect right now. Every like part of the UK and every style of thing, apart from there's a little bit of Birmingham that needs full combat feather arena events, and we've been promised it was this year, but I don't really believe that rumor anymore. So I want to live update on that.
Bristol,
Considering that there's only one spare weekend this entire year. Because
that doesn't leave much.
Well, yeah, after next weekend, there is an event in the UK every weekend up until mid-December. So
yeah. That's brilliant.
It's freaking. Can I plug? We have a calendar that's the UK and EU calendar on our website with a map. And it's the place to go if you're trying to find events in the UK if you're not sure where to compete, and also Europe. So we chat with our Dutch pals, our German pals, our Czech pals. We've got some people in Spain starting up an event at the moment. But yeah, if you want to see what events are coming up, go to the Bristol Bot Builders UK and EU calendar, because it is absolutely, as Dave says, thriving at the moment. We've got so many events going on in the UK, and I'm buzzed about that. Just not in this little bit of Birmingham that I can't wait to see what's going to happen there.
We've moved the arena to, it's about 200 meters away from the workshop now. There's a big change at our workshop at the moment with a lot of change at the moment, which is good. But we're hoping to get that arena up because it's done like 2 events and it's a brand new arena sat there. We should just donate it to RoboNerd and just get them to build it each year and do something.
Yeah, that sounds great. You're our secret billionaire. You just didn't know it. It's perfect. Happy ending for everybody. No, I'm joking. But yeah, let's fight full combat feathers with you sometime. Yeah, James.
I think that's the one. That's the one element that's missing, because that used to be the when Robot Wars wasn't a thing at the time. That was the big event of the year. It was 3 days of hardcore full combat feathers. But unfortunately, I mean, we are still doing full combat feathers, but it's a bit, because of the geography, it's not the easiest to access for some folks. And also 5 fights in very short succession at full combat is not sustainable. So, we do need to focus more on feathers, I think, because the ant and beetle scenes are definitely going strong and the heavyweights are doing their own thing. They might get a bit stagnant in the UK, I think. But obviously, in America, the heavy scene's going to keep going. But in the US, it's going to. Sorry.
Allegedly, it's keeping going. I don't know. It's something that we I think it was 10 years ago this year. We did a big open day at our workshop, and it's something that we want to do again, where we got OptiPower. They were a manufacturer of lithium polymer batteries as they were just coming out, and they did a big talk at our workshop, and we had Kane Aston doing like pneumatic specialists. It was a really nice way of like getting the community to just come and learn some stuff, and then we had the arena up as well to put on an event. So it's something
was this you battle testing the lipos with a 2x4?
We don't talk about that.
Now it's on the internet.
Edit that bit out. I'm sorry.
But yeah, it's going great. Everything's going great. We're buzzed about how things are going. We just need we need one more EO to do a thing. We've suggested a few times here. But yeah, we're doing our national Beetle champs in November, and we've got some Germans and Dutch coming over for that. So we're quite hyped for that. So watch that. There's gonna be a live stream, and we're gonna have a big audience. It's gonna be hype. So come do champs, everybody. Dave's gonna be there, of course. Tom and Sarah.
Well, I'll be signing up, but it's a lottery, right? So
yeah. Well, may the lottery be with you, Tom.
Thank you.
I'll have to make sure that I include links in the description of this video, for those that are interested, because we gotta keep building it, right? Get the scene going. So yeah, and so for anybody that's watching, if you were like me and you don't have your passport, you need to get on that, and you need to go over to the UK and watch some robot combat, because
Especially if you're a billionaire. Yeah.
Yeah. We need more billionaires who are into this hobby coming to the UK.
So if any billionaires are watching this video, then there you go.
But yeah, we'll gladly have you as our pit interviewer, Christine, if you want to come do that. So
that would be great.
That'd be awesome. You'll literally be outside the box. There'll be the arena, and you'll be next to it outside the box with a microphone. It's perfect.
You know I would, and I think I watch enough Doctor Who and Great British Bake Off and all of that stuff. I think I'd fit in okay. So
excellent.
Yeah, you'll be right at home with us.
You're gonna tell people that robots have got a soggy base.
The
Sarah.
The new series of Bake Off starts next week.
We're very
Let's
excited.
go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Release tomorrow.
So the baking scene is thriving at the moment in the UK. So
Oh yeah.
so you're telling me that I have to build a food themed robot and bring it over there.
Oh please, Joe, can we do Great British Bodge Off again?
yeah, give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, I still got the remains of my Great British Bodge Off entry on my workshop wall. So there's a burger box on wheels with the box opened and closed with the plastic forks as teeth and a big spatula on the front.
Oh my god, your bottom is soggy.
There you go. And this is American who did this for us. This poster we did when we did our Bake Off themed event. So there you go. There's your next house robot, James. Bit of inspiration for you.
Very nice. Very nice.
I approve, and this is perfect because I've decided now that all of my robots are Apple themed in some way. So I'm sure I can find a way to make that work.
That sounds perfect. Awesome.
I'm sure Rory would approve because he's a side of armor. So
yeah, that's true.
Well, for everyone that's watching, if you liked this, just so that everybody knows, it is definitely my intention to do some more of these international episodes to explore some of the other scenes around the world. We're going to have one talking about New Zealand, and very hopefully talking about Brazil, which I would obviously love to do. So just keep watching, make sure that you like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. We're making a push to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm getting very close, so that would be super exciting. And just keep watching, keep supporting Combat Robotics, and we'll see everybody next time on the show. Hey everyone, guess what? We've got some bonus content to this episode. As Sarah here was supposed to join the original roundtable, wasn't able to make it, but I know that y'all know I wasn't going to not include one of my BattleBot besties in this episode. So Sarah is here to talk a little bit more about the UK scene, to kind of add on to the conversation. So welcome.
Hi. Yeah, so I don't actually know what you guys said, because I had to miss out because I had to run off to the emergency dentist. But yeah, so how can I contribute to what was already said?
Yes, so I think for you, what is perfect to talk about, because a lot of the conversation has been kind of where things have come in the combat robotics scene in the UK, and where it is right now, where we might like to see it get to. And I think to kind of talk about everything that kind of came before BuggleBots, and let there be like a perfect stage and opportunity for that to happen when it did, and kind of where things have come since then, because I just think, we've talked about this before, obviously, but I think it was such a great thing to happen because truly, I think the smaller robots are the heart and soul of combat robotics, and a key thing to help grow this as an entry point for people that's not so intimidating as building a heavyweight robot.
Right. I mean, there are so few teams who have dived straight into the world of heavyweights. I'd say probably like a good 75% of the scene has, of the heavyweight scene at least, has started out in smaller weight classes. So yeah, one of the biggest appeals of them is that they're so accessible, because being smaller, they cost a fraction of the price of the heavyweights. You can build an entire beetle weight for the cost of like one heavyweight part in some circumstances. So they're a great accessible class, especially if you haven't got much money and you want to give it a try, and especially if you're not sure it's for you, because the sport can be an absolute money sink. I mean, how many people do you know go to all the effort of buying components, putting them together just to smash them up, and do it all over again? So it's a complete money sink hobby. And so you've got to be kind of sure, do I want to do this? And then, so yeah, it's a really great accessible way to not spend too much money discovering if the sport is for you or not.
Yes, exactly. And like I said, we've talked about this before on a prior episode, but I mean, for you getting involved in something like that, I mean, do you think that everything that came before, I mean, Robot Wars was obviously something very different, but leading up to that, to set the stage for something to say, hey, this is something that people can enjoy and also have a stronger opportunity to participate in? Because actually something that got really was interesting that got brought up in the initial conversation is that the first series of Robot Wars was more popular because people watched it and felt like they could, get a wheelchair and like modify it and make something and be like, I could, put that in there and it could do something. Whereas the newer series didn't really feel that way. It felt like the robots were stronger and you couldn't just build something to beat that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a lot more pertinent in BattleBots as well. Because I mean, Robot Wars, even in the newer series, it still had robots like Nuts, which it heavily promoted the fact that this was like a 500-pound robot and was built out of like farm parts and stuff like that. So it kind of never 100% lost that maybe I could do this magic. But with something like BattleBots, I think it really does, because they quite brazenly say how much these robots cost now. And, it's not just, I think it's not just kids watching it going, I don't have the skill to do that. It's people watching it going, I don't have the money to do that either, right? And so I think the Beetleweight class in that respect is almost kind of, it's filled in that void. It's gone, actually, you know what, if you join in this way, then it is accessible, because the skills that you learn in this weight class are totally transferable to that weight class. So, and you don't have to just start a heavyweight like from scratch. You could like offer yourself to another team and go and help them out at a live event and get some experience that way as well. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I love the Beetleweight class the most, is because it retains that come and have a go spirit that the heavyweights are quickly losing.
Yes, absolutely. And I know, I mean, there's a pretty healthy scene in the UK right now with all of the events that happen. I mean, like, I know David was talking about his schedule, and it seems like he has something going on every weekend.
Oh, he does. But this is why I suggested to you that you should have him on as a guest, because Dave is like the pillar of our community and helps out at pretty much like every event going. If David Weston's not there, the only clue that you might have is that he's a metalhead. So maybe he's at a metal festival, because like every time I've been at an event and he's not been there, he's been at a metal festival or a gig of some kind. So like that's the only reason Dave Weston will not be there. But yeah, and he helps so many people out as well, giving rides or helping out on their team or arena marshalling. And yeah, he's got his finger in every single robot pie going, basically. And yeah, sorry, I forgot what your original question was. I've just been bragging about David.
No, I was just talking about like the scene and how it seems to be like there's events happening often.
Oh yeah. I think Bugglebots definitely contributed to the Beetleweight class getting a lot more popular in the UK. It was pretty thriving in the US, and I you can back that up with the fact that we had Tyler come over for series 1 of BuggleBots, and just you listen to like all the trophies he's got, and he's got more trophies than we had competitions going on in the UK at the time. And yeah, I mean, basically since BuggleBots, beta weights have just become so popular, and like I think now they're basically oversubscribed. It's a shame that actually I'm not here to get Joe's input on that, because I mean, he obviously runs Bristol Bot Builders, and I know from their post that it's got to the point where they've had to design special application processes to accommodate the fact that so many people are applying to these events now. And it's actually, you know, ages ago, if you were a beta weight competitor, like sort of pre-BuggleBots era, if you wanted to go to a beta weight event, you were almost pretty much guaranteed to get in, and you could probably run like 2 or 3 robots in it because it didn't have enough robots. But now it's the complete opposite. Now it's like there's a set time for registration for an event, and they're trying their best to be fair to everybody. And yeah, it's not, I haven't gone to an event in so long. It's just they're so oversubscribed. It's like, and I'm not usually available at the time when the applications go live. So it's like, But at the same time, it's great that the scene's doing so well.
Right, absolutely. And I think another big theme we talked about kind of along that vein is, you know, the difference between the US and the UK in terms of what that scene is like right now. And I think a big thing that got brought up is that in the UK, to say do an event like a Norwalk, where it has this like huge production and the finals have this like really large prize at the end for competitors, that in the UK there's just not simply the funding that say
there's no big event sponsors like that at all.
Right.
It's the UK scene is entirely run on love and sheer dedication. Because nobody gets paid for events. In fact, I don't think I could name people who get paid for events at all. It's literally it's run on love and dedication, and sometimes a little bit of insanity. Actually, quite a lot of insanity, but but yeah, no, you've got to love it to participate in the UK. I mean, there's some other technical differences as well. Like, for example, you almost never see a pit in a American arena. And also our beta weight limit is slightly higher because of it's 1.5 kilograms here. And I think the limit in metric for you guys is about 1.36 or something like that. So it's the weight limit is slightly less. And then obviously in the UK, you can only have links. You can't have switches like you can in the US. So that, yeah, there's some technical differences as well. But yeah, there's no event, I don't think, with prize money at all that's been entirely UK run.
Yeah. And I know in the last part of this, they were all saying that it would be nice if some billionaire donor would come along and sponsor combat robotics in the UK.
As long as he's a nice one, please. I can think of some ones I definitely don't want doing that.
that is true. But yeah, I mean, we really did get into, even just from a design aspect, the difference between the robots here in the States versus the UK. You know, over here it's very spinner heavy, whereas there's probably a great deal more flippers over there. I mean, what do you think is the biggest influence of that?
I think one of the things is that the spinner compared to the flipper gives you the best kind of weight trade-off, because it's one of the weapons where you can get an awful lot of destructive power out of it for very little weight, especially if you're going brushless. So of course that means you've got more you can put in your armor and stuff like that. And I think also, I mean, the US beetle scene has been more, I want to say, like established for longer than the UK. And I think also in the UK we still have that kind of old school robot war sense that we're still not afraid to try silly robots and throw them in the arena with the big spinners. It's great fun when you see like Spellbinder versus like Daedalus, for example, which is just basically like think of the worst flipper you can from ancient BattleBots time, and imagine it getting put up against Tombstone, right? And that, we love seeing that at the same time. It's just, we love the fun robots as much as we love the silly ones. But yeah, I think it's a lot of it will be because of the trade-off. You know, people have learned that spinners are the most destructive and they're the most kind of efficient, if you will, weapon, especially in terms of weight. So there's going to be a lot more of those. And whereas I think in the UK we do still love our flippers. And yeah, the scene's not quite as established, and we do have the pit as well. And so, you know, a good flip in the pit, that's a decent win. We love that.
Yes, absolutely. For me, I honestly love the idea of a pit. It is not completely uncommon in the US, but there are very few events that do it. And I'll kind of be curious as time goes on whether, you know, one way of doing things influences the other, and we see it be a little bit more like blended.
I think a lot of spinner builders argue that the pit gives them a disadvantage, especially over like wedge bots or flippers. And often wedges and flippers can be the same thing, right? So I think that might be another contributing factor. The lack of the pit in the US means that spinners haven't got that risk of pelting their opponent but accidentally knocking themselves in the pit at the same time. And whilst I can see where they're coming from, I look at the BattleBots arena, which doesn't have a pit, and their sort of arena hazards are very like minimal, really. And in that aspect, I feel like the spinners have a massive advantage over other robots, to the point where it's almost like, is it worth building any other robot other than a spinner? Because there's nothing to kind of like level the playing field. And in my personal opinion, having the pit in the UK scene kind of levels that playing field, because it does give that little bit of an edge to the control or flipper robots, but in my opinion, without unfairly disadvantaging others. So yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, you've always got to remember this is a rock, paper, sport, scissors. There isn't the perfect design, especially when there's different arenas around. So to me, the pit just adds to that kind of rock, paper, scissors thing. You know, it does disadvantage the spinners a bit, but for me, not so much so that it gives them so much disadvantage, you know, compared to BattleBots, where spinners have a huge advantage in that arena. So yeah, I think that's maybe got a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then really a last question for you, because I mean, you've been involved in the scene for a while and worked with different types of robots. I mean, is there anything right now where you'd like to see it go, or anything that you'd like to see like change, or, you know, what have you there, to kind of make it better and get more people involved?
I think with how oversubscribed events are, it would be nice if we had more events. And that's not me saying that the existing events should be like doing more events, because I know that those guys are giving up their own time to do this, and we have lives, right? But so I'm just, you know, from a fairy tale point of view, it'd be lovely if we had more events, especially spread out throughout the country, because it seems like there's hotspots, right? Bristol is kind of a hotspot for the beetle weight events, but you've also got Robo Dojo right up in the north. And I mean, sometimes even if you live locally, sometimes they're still difficult to get to, because I'm only 30 minutes from Bristol myself. And yeah, I've struggled to get to some events. So it'd be great if events happen more often. But at the same time, I don't want that to come at the expense of like people giving up their lives too much. I personally like to see more featherweight events as well, because Robo Dojo at the moment seems to be the only one running featherweights, and they're right up north in the UK. So that kind of hinders a lot of people from down south from competing. The Coopers did used to run featherweight events, and they ran the featherweight champs, which would happen at the Insomnia Gaming Festival, and that was really cool. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened for a few years, and I really want that to come back, because that was a great event, and a lot of people really enjoyed those events. So I'd like to see featherweights getting some more love in the UK. But again, it's the expectation on event organizers to run them. It's just all very well me sitting here saying, you know, come on, put more events, but you know, it takes people and money and dedication to do that. So yeah, in my perfect world, more beetle weight events to account for the oversubscription, and more featherweight events, because I haven't done a featherweight in so long.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you brought that up, because that absolutely did get brought up in the first part of the interview with the featherweight. So I think everybody's kind of thinking the same thing there.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the arena with all of those guys at the Insomnia Gaming Festival. In fact, the first non-heavyweight robot I ever drove belonged to Dave Weston. He let me drive, I believe it was called Satanics, at one of the previous, I think it was in 2017 at Insomnia Gaming Festival. And I've been in an animal rumble at the one year. It was the Coopers did it in conjunction with King of Bots from China. And so there was a live stream for it because they brought all their like camera crews and stuff over. And I was in an animal themed rumble with one of Joe's robots, excuse me, one of Joe's robots. And there was I think it was a cat. I'm not sure. Or he was helping somebody who had a cat. So, but yeah. Oh, no, tell a lie. No, it was the crab. His Crabsolutely Crawful was in the arena with Nelly and a cat and a hedgehog, I think. That was a fun fight.
That is terrific.
I think Nelly was the third to fall.
Yeah, I know that they also talked about potentially doing another food event because there was one that was themed out for like the Great British Bake Off. So, you know, something like that may come back. So I love it. I think it's so fun. It's like so cheeky. So I'm completely down with it.
Another thing I'd like to see more of, just because it's fun and it's silly, is I believe in the US that you call it Asplin, but it's called BattleBots over here. And it's basically robots of a certain weight class that are not dangerous. So like we're talking like cardboard robots and like stuff you build out of junk. So there's no spinners or anything like that. And they're just basically daft robots. And they're so much fun. And the fights are so interesting because it's fun, you come up with all these daft and silly and novel ideas to put into your bot. And so yeah, you can have some quite interesting fights, and it's just I love it because it's like it's a break from the seriousness because you know sometimes the guys in particular they take it so seriously and so competitively, and it's like, oh come on man, we're here for fun, you know. So that I'd like to see more of BattleBots / Asbots, to translate it into American. Yeah, I'd like to see more of that too. They're good fun.
Absolutely. Well, I am so glad that we got a chance to talk and add to the conversation because I just I'll say it on this part because everybody said I didn't say it on the live aspect because I didn't want to, but I love UK bots. Obviously some bots from the UK are some of my favorites of all time. So I want to see that scene continue to grow and thrive, and hopefully that happens.
That's all. No, thank you for having me. I love talking about the UK scene because it's because the lower weight classes is really what got me my complete love of the sport. I mean, I loved it from Robot Wars onwards, but never imagined that I'd ever get involved. And the Beatles were a great entry point for me into the sport, so I feel very affectionate towards them. And BuggleBots wouldn't have happened without the beta weight class, because how on earth were 3 random people from across the country with, you know, just everyday jobs and no connections to TV production crews or sponsorship, how on earth were we going to pull off a heavyweight event, or even a featherweight event was, you know, just completely out of reach. So it allowed us to make the magic that was BuggleBots. So I feel very affectionately towards it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, everyone, just keep watching. Please like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And thank you again, Sarah, and everyone else for joining me on this show. And we'll see everybody next time on the show.
You're welcome.